welcome to Face to Face, our weekly review of most important events affecting Poland, Ukraine and the world. I'm your host Adam Jasser. My guest today is, as always, Michał Broniatowski, Editor-in-Chief of TVP World. Michał, welcome.
Thank you.
So, the ceasefire in Ukraine has riveted the world attention this week. Kiev accepted the US proposal for a 30-day break in the fighting, and the ball was then passed by Washington to Vladimir Putin. And guess what? He threw back a curved ball, saying, yes, but I want this and that and something else in return. So, in fact, it seems he considered nothing of his maximalist agenda.
Well, I wouldn't call it sending back a curved ball, because no ball was sent to the other side. I think it is a type of decades-old game of Russians, which I would call Kremlin volleyball. On the other side, on their part of the court, they should touch the ball only 3 times. That Russians are touching this ball as long as they like, and this ball is now jumping around, but still on their court. And enough of these metaphors, because the reality is very, very hard. Putin simply is cheating President Trump, and President Trump is playing his game.
In what sense?
In the sense that for example, he pledges to Mr. Putin to spare lives of thousands of surrounded Ukrainian soldiers, in this Kursk region, which is not true, and he should have known better. They cannot be surrounded there because there is a border on the east side of this army, so they are not surrounded, and but they are withdrawing anyway. So
yes, I mean, pardon me for interrupting you, because we keep, hearing and thinking about how great a negotiator Mr. President Trump is. But his negotiation basically amounts to threats and pleading in public. And his team is relatively novice. And against them is lined up a veteran team of Kremlin, people who have played this game since the Soviet times.
These people in the Kremlin, not only in foreign ministry as well, they know how to use power, how to speak to their interlocutors using force. I think you can convince Putin to listen, for example, exerting more strengths at the front line, for example, or just getting him for his word. He says he's agreeing for ceasefire, but there are nuances. So tell us, what are these nuances, and tell us yes or no. I don't know, it would be perhaps wrong to say that Mr. Trump doesn't have guts to say that. But it's obvious tactics towards Mr. Putin.
Yes, the impression might be that they're so eager, the Trump team and Mr. Trump himself, they're so eager to get a deal and to get peace, that they even though they hold pretty strong cards, they keep showing them to the other side.
Yes, it's funny that they are playing with cards like that.
Mike Waltz, Mike Waltz goes on television and says, the future peace deal can have this and this and this and that, including no NATO and including, concessions, territorial concessions. So he's basically stating their final position before proper negotiations started.
Yes, this is a bit odd, and of course Russians will use it. They are using it already. But we also need to look at Ukrainians, because we forgot that they also are doing some diplomatic work in here. And after the disastrous event in the Oval Office only 2 weeks ago, can you imagine? It sounds like...
Yeah, history has accelerated, right?
Yes, a bit. You know, and they... last week, well, this week, on Monday, they had to surrender to really brutal duress. We called it last time a treason. Treason because they stopped sharing intelligence with them, which ended up tragically for several Ukrainians. But there is a silver lining in this surrender. First, that we already said that Russians now are forced to respond. They have to show that they have positive attitude to the negotiator. You know, America, which until 1 month ago was a party in this conflict. But there is also one more thing which we
overlook,
more or less overlook, is that they agreed for ceasefire, but they didn't sign this minerals agreement over which the whole conflict with Trump erupted.
You mean the Ukrainians haven't
Ukrainians,
signed it?
you know, they have their doubts about...
So they said, we agree in principle, but let's wait with the signature.
Yes, but they didn't sign it because you remember what Mr. Zelensky was saying in the Oval Office. He was saying that we cannot agree for anything without your guarantees that Russians will not come back in a second and defeat us. And he was not forced to sign it. So, as I said, silver lining may be a significant victory for
the Ukrainians.
For Ukrainians, that they are not losing their card.
Yes, you're right. You know, sticking to the cards metaphor, you know, it seems Trump has strong cards, but he keeps showing them. Ukrainians have weak hand overall, you know, if you take everything into account, but they're playing their cards pretty well.
Yes, and Putin has both.
Strength and cards.
Strength, and he knows how to keep...
And he's got people in the back sort of telling what's in the cards of the other players.
Yes, right? They are watching.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, the funny thing is, again, you know, that so far it seems to me that the Americans haven't got that much in return for everything they've done from Putin. They got a lot from Zelensky by twisting his arm, but they didn't get much for Putin. So again, I'm sorry, maybe we're stretching this card game metaphor too far, but it seems, you know, someone could be arguing that the Americans are being played by the Russians.
Oh, not someone. Everybody should say that.
Okay.
Who is not blind, but we already mentioned that, and I think this. You know, I think next week when we meet again, we'll have another big twist to talk about. But I'm afraid we won't be talking about a ceasefire, because Russians cannot agree for ceasefire. Not to mention that you know, they are saying that Ukrainians would be able to regroup or something like that. Well, they also can regroup.
Exactly, and they would certainly do that.
Yes, but you know, agreeing for them to ceasefire means that they start a peace process, which they don't want.
Yes,
because
it will be harder for them to interrupt that later.
Because the peace process includes points which cannot be agreed by Ukrainians and cannot be agreed by the West, which were the main goals of the war when it started 3 years ago. It's stopping Ukraine from going into NATO.
Well, that seems to be...
Well, in 4 years we will have another president.
Yes, later maybe that will change. Yes. But, apart from Ukraine, Mr. Trump was also busy with tariffs and other things. And apart from pleading with Mr. Putin and imposing 200% sanctions on French champagne, President Trump renewed his threat to annex Greenland. This time during a photo op. He likes these photo ops and saying things during photo ops with NATO boss Mark Rutte. And only a day after Greenlanders voted in an election, which, as we heard from our reporter there, can be summed up as, we don't want to become part of the United States. So, what do you think? Is this a serious threat, or was he again just showing off on television? Is this another case where we need to take Trump seriously but not literally?
I'd rather we treated him literally. America has a history of invading its neighbors, in 19th century and beginning of 20th century even. It's Cuban War, annexation of large part of Mexico, which is today called Texas, Hawaii. They know how to do it. And probably before they try.
But that's a bit of an ancient history, right?
I don't know.
In a sense,
I don't know.
Since the Second World War, actually since the First World War, America had rather reluctant attitude to attacking other countries unless provoked.
Well, at least. Since that time, they have always been against Russia. Russia was their main
well, not during the Second World War. With
the exception of Second World War, but this was just the situation there. But in general, they were against a dictator named Stalin and so on. Now they face another dictator named Putin, and they behave.
But how does that relate to Greenland?
It relates.
I'm sorry, I need to reel you in a little.
Yes, it relates to Greenland that its about faces are possible. You are saying that this Pax Americana was with us for many years, and it's no longer here. Changes like for example, taking back the control of Panama Channel, annexation of Greenland.
Threatened annexation so far.
It's already threatened. We are talking about future.
Right. Okay. But
it may happen.
But if I may interrupt you, he sort of. There was an element of comedy in all this because Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, was sitting there and he said, "Oh, maybe NATO can help me," So, just for a second.
Article 5, please.
Just consider this. Yes, Article 5. Denmark calling Article 5 because Greenland is attacked. But even some serious analysts are saying, yes, NATO is the correct path for Greenland because Trump can achieve his aim of securing Greenland against, let's say, Russian or Chinese influence there by strengthening NATO's position there. So, I'm just wondering if we're not overblowing this.
As I said, it's better to treat what he says literally and then be nicely disappointed. Right?
Okay.
Well, America already has a big presence, military presence in Greenland.
But everyone agrees it's not secure. I mean, the entire island. It's a huge island, small garrison. Everybody agrees this is not...
NATO will have to increase its presence in Greenland.
So maybe Trump is mobilizing NATO to do that.
Perhaps. He's very good in mobilizing NATO.
Okay, here you go. All right, let's if Mr. Rutte, who was visibly embarrassed by this exchange in the Oval Office over Greenland, but he wasn't the only one because there's another European leader who who has claimed, like Mr. Rutte, to have excellent relations with President Trump. And that leader also got a slap on the wrist from Trump's administration. And I'm talking here about Polish President Andrzej Duda, who went public with a plea to the US to include Poland in its nuclear sharing program. And that's a serious issue. And he got a public rebuke from no other than Vice President J.D. Vance. Oops.
Oops. In general, issues of defense should be discussed in closed cabinets.
Particularly so sensitive.
Particularly strategic issues, because nuclear weapons dislocation is absolutely a strategic issue.
And the Americans are negotiating with the Russians, regardless of whether they do it well or not. But they're negotiating with the Russians, and here comes President Duda saying, well, we don't nuke American nukes in Poland, which is like...
even given, remembering that American politicians are using usually a very blunt language. What we heard from from Vice President J.D. Vance after the statement of President Duda, and he said, "I would be shocked if Trump agreed for that." It's.
Yes.
Spare me the necessity.
He could, because he could have said, well, at the moment we're not considering this.
Exactly. It was.
It was, boom.
Get lost.
Yeah, get lost, yeah.
I'm sorry.
But, in a sense, President Duda, to his credit, he's taking a lot of these diplomatic actions recently. And this is a rare example where he and the government, they're from opposing political camps, but on security, at least, they seem to be speaking the same language. And even the Prime Minister Tusk, thanked President Duda for his stance. So it's just unfortunate that then, all this positive capital, then President Duda is sort of wasted.
A few days ago, he was not clearly, but he was alluding to criticism of Zelensky after this.
Yes, that he's not a great diplomat, and then he does.
Yes, diplomacy requires something more than strong emotions. It requires ability to play long term.
Well, he should listen to his own advice. Finally, Michał, we have only a little time left, and I just wanted to ask you a more philosophical question, although it's going to be related to a current event, namely, in Romania, the Electoral Bureau and then the top court banned pro-Russian and possibly Russia-sponsored candidate in the election, Călin Georgescu. So he cannot run in May on the grounds that he violated electoral laws on financing his previous campaign. The decision is final, but it feeds into a debate on whether this is a defense of democracy or is it actually a travesty of democracy when a popular candidate is excluded. What's your take on it?
Well, it depends where you sit. If you sit in Moscow...
Oh, you stole my line. Anyway, carry on.
It is a travesty. If you sit in places which experience this sort of influence by Russians, we can say that finally somebody has guts to say no to these gentlemen who are really getting involved in every possible elections in Europe and in the United States since more than 10 years now. If somebody is saying that democracy should defend itself, this is the way to defend.
Okay.
Say no to people who are breaking rules.
And even if there are any doubts, as you rightly pointed out, the fact that it's being cheered by Moscow, where there's no democracy, protested by Moscow, it's like, thieves running police academy.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Michał.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for watching Face to Face, and please stay with us for more news and commentary.